Live. The broadcast is live, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reasonably Fine Art Talk with me, Charlie Hunter, the Reasonably Fine Artist. Now, Charbonneau, the cat, is wandering around the house. We may get another visit from him. We've had a visit earlier. He was helping during a meeting that I was having on the phone where I was needing to look at my calendar, and he was helping by going to sleep on the calendar. And the specific gravity of one small cat is quite remarkable when you're trying to move it off a monthly planner. Remarkable, ladies and gentlemen, remarkable. Well, as you know, during the Reasonably Fine Art Talk, we have been kind of visiting what my process is in creating a painting. And last week we had a conversation with Jeff Olson from Royal Talons, where we talked about materials. This week we're going to go back to the concept of the week before of talking about the journey that a painting makes. And what I'd like to do is start with the last completed painting that I had talked about. And that is one of the paper mill paintings. Dan, can you put that slide up? There we go. So you all remember this painting. I hope you all remember it, which was the junk surface that I had. It was a 30 by 30 that for the previous few years I had been just scraping dead paint off my palette onto this surface. And then flipping through my sketchbook, I looked for a drawing that I had made that was reminiscent of the shapes that I could kind of see in the Junker painting. And this was the result. Now, I'm a big fan of Monet. Who isn't? We all are. And you know how he did his paintings of the haystacks. And you know, I think it's amazing to think that the street sweepers decided to go past my house right while I'm doing a broadcast. That's amazing, ladies and gentlemen. But also amazing is that Monet just was looking at that one haystack, or that series of haystacks, one summer, and painted, "Oh, it's Dave, come to mow the lawn." That's what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. I gotta close some doors, hang on. Dan, put that painting right back up on the screen. All right, of course that's when Dave would come by. And we appreciate Dave coming by. But anyway, Monet was doing those haystacks. And that farmer must have looked out across the field and thought, what is with that guy doing paintings of the damn haystack? And now you go to the Art Institute of Chicago, and there are those paintings memorialized. Well, I'm hoping someday at the Art Institute of Sandusky or the Art Institute of Altoona, you'll go in and there will be the Charlie Hunter paintings of the rotting paper mills at Bellows Falls, Vermont. So anyway, so there was this painting. And I really enjoyed doing that, but I didn't feel like I was finished. I thought there were so many other ways I could tell the story that I went and said that I took that drawing and I did a much more calculated painting of it. Let's go to the next slide, Dan. This is the paper mill, and then this is just a shot from the front seat of my Honda Element, where I did the sketch in early April. So that's the sketch in the foreground, and that's the actual paper mill in the background. Let's go to the next one. This, you may or may not remember, was a painting that I did in about 2003, when I would say I was still finding my voice. It is done in the field. It is that same paper mill, though I'm looking the opposite direction. And the feeling that I got with this of kind of this big man-made space that is now wildering, that I still feel like I have more to say about that. Next slide, Dan. So I took my sketch and I projected it on a 30-inch by 30-inch panel. Now, the 30-inch by 30-inch panel that I'm using here is Gatorboard, which is like foam core, except it's made with gypsum on the outside, so it's much more rigid. It does not warp when it gets wet. I then glue using Amsterdam acrylic binder. I glue inexpensive muslin from the fabric store to that Gatorboard surface. And then I put 3 coats of Amsterdam acrylic gesso, any good quality artist gesso. Don't use the stuff that's $10 a gallon. There's a reason it's $10 a gallon. You'll use 3 times as much. So you'll end up paying, no, you'll use 5 times as much. So you'll end up paying the same as you would for good gesso. So 3 coats of Amsterdam acrylic gesso. And then I projected this drawing. So I didn't want to worry about getting all my proportions correct. I wanted to start fighting the fight with the painting, as opposed to spending all the time with rendering. Next slide, Dan. So this was my first pass of, I drew with a pencil onto the surface, and then this is the first pass that I made with paints. This is using a mixture of raw umber, Van Dyke brown, and a little burnt sienna, I believe. You'll see, and you look in the center of this painting, the far background. That is a very, very watery mix, because remember, I'm using Cobra water mixable oils. You could get the same effect by using conventional oils. I just see no reason to. The water serves the purpose just fine that odorless mineral spirits or Gamsol does. So I did the first pass with very watery slurry of the paint for the background, and then adding just a lot more kind of out of the tube thickness of paint for the structure on the left, and a bit of the structure of the gantry-way across the top. You'll note there is a very dark horizontal on the lower right. I kind of wish I hadn't done that, but I did. And as my father would say, whenever I would do something exceptionally stupid, my father would say, "Now you've done that." Next slide, Dan. This is the second pass. Here I'm experimenting with a few glazes in that far background and the foreground. I liked how I was getting kind of this glowing feeling with that very watery pass in the far background versus the very paint graphic-y stuff of the building structure and the gantry-way. So I did a glaze using using Cobra painting medium with some red violet, I believe, was the paint color, mixed with a little ultramarine blue. So you see it's starting to pick up kind of a little bit of that roseate color in the far distance and in the right foreground. Next slide. Which made me think of a record cover of my childhood. Well, not childhood, of my teenage years. Back in the day, children, back in the day, you could go to any number of local five and dime stores or variety stores that would have cutout racks, $1.98 records. A new record was probably $5.99, and a cutout was $1.98. Now, cutout, all I did was they took a record that hadn't done terribly well, and they'd drill a hole through the corner of the cover. And that technically made the record damaged so that the record company could sell it to a quote unquote rack jobber for pennies and not have to pay the artist any royalty. So it was a way that if the record company thought that Ian Lloyd and Stories was going to sell 100,000 records, and so they pressed 100,000 records, and Ian Lloyd and Stories only sold 80,000 records, the last 20,000 records would get holes punched through the cover and sold to a rack jobber for 15 cents each. So the record company at least made some money back on the 20,000 records that hadn't sold, and us consumers could buy a record for $1.98. Of course, it wasn't anything in it for the artists, so nothing much has changed in that respect. Recording artists have gotten screwed by record companies since time immemorial, and it's reached a fine art at this point with Spotify and Pandora. But anyway, this was a record that I got for $1.98. Ian Lloyd and Stories was a band. They were all Americans, but the record company, which was Kama Sutra, which was just a totally shifty record company, the guy's real name was something like, Joey Del Giorno, but they decided that really wasn't exotic sounding. I think Rod Stewart was very popular at that era, and so they wanted to turn him in, and he had a voice a lot like Rod Stewart. He had one hit, Louis, black. She was black as the night. Louis was whiter than white. Danger, danger, when you taste brown sugar. Louis fell in love overnight. Louis, 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 you're gonna cry. It's a big hit, ladies and gentlemen. This was the follow-up album to that, and actually, it was a kind of a psychedelic record, as you probably can tell from that the album cover art. But since Louis Louis had been a hit, it's not Louis Louis by the Kingsmen. I just want to make sure you all know that. It was called Brother Louis. Since Brother Louis had been such a hit, they had them record another song that sounded exactly like it. So this record has a song called Mammy Blue that is basically Brother Louis with different words. But anyway, I got this record for $1.98. It was a pretty good record. It actually is quite a good record. But this cover, I just loved. I loved the color world of this cover. And strangely, it has been one of the most influential images in my head during my time as a painter. I don't know why it stuck with me, but it hasn't stuck with me accurately at all. When I look at it now, it's very hard to see, aside from a similar love of kind of that pinkish violet, what the relationship was between that second pass of this painting and this record cover. But yet there it was in my brain. And I think we all have that. When we're working on a painting, we will kind of have just like a scent, a faraway aroma wafts through of some other visual thing from our past. Next slide. Which also made me think about Robert Rauschenberg. I have no idea why the cover of Ian Lloyd and Stories Traveling Underground and some random Rauschenberg, it wasn't this one, but this gives you an idea of what Rauschenberg stuff looks like. A lot of collage, kind of dripping paint, big splats, big swashes of color, But both that Ian Lloyd and the Rauschenberg have this, they seem to be talking about something very specific, but you can't quite tell what it is. But so both of those, thinking about Rauschenberg and thinking about that Ian Lloyd Traveling Underground cover, that was in my mind when I did the next pass on the painting. Dan, next slide. You'll see, look at the far background now. See the blues that are coming in there? Those are glazes of ultramarine blue and maybe some cyan. In the sky, I'm doing glazes with transparent oxide yellow. In the left foreground, I have there is a post. It is directly under where the gantry-way meets the building, goes straight down the side of the building. You'll see a post. It's directly above the spray bottle on my easel. That post is where I was thinking about Rauschenberg. In the previous passes, I had left it uncolored. On this one, I mixed up some is it Pyrazole red and cad yellow light, and did just with a brush stroke, put that in there to see what that engendered. That's the real Rauschenberg moment. And then we've got Ian Lloyd and Stories going on with the purples and the blues. Next slide, Dan. There's a close-up of where it is at present. I did a second pass over that post. And I really like what's going on now. I did last night, I did that gloppy to the left of the post. I did this gloppy glaze of cad yellow with a little tiny, cad yellow light with a little tiny bit of the Pyrazole red, but mostly just the painting medium. And then I did more kind of spattering with a paintbrush, spattering with a toothbrush, more passes of purple. And then in the foreground, look at the lower right now. I took, for the whole area that had been dark all the way to the front of the painting, I did another pass with just palette knife and squeegee, verticals and horizontals, of putting, it's very oily, using a lot of medium, just to get that texture continuing forward. Next slide, Dan. Look up close at that texture. Isn't that delicious? Isn't that delicious, ladies and gentlemen? That's the texture you're seeing on the left-hand side of this. That is by putting a dry paper towel, the back side of a dry paper towel. I used to use Bounty. Now I'm using Kirkland, which is Costco's brand, which is just as good as Bounty. But you get that kind of Ben-Day dot, that halftone dot look. And then on the right, it just has all that brushy texture. Really happy with that. Sorry for the glare. It's just me with my phone camera. Next slide. Here we are closer, kind of showing the panorama of where we were, where we got last night, of the far background. I think I'm just going to leave it that unexpressed. The darks of the shadow area, where the undergrowth is building up, and then the post and the yellow glaze to the left of that, and then the kind of the most pronounced color is the post, the yellow glaze, the foreground. Those are the most pronounced colors aside from the glow in the sky. Next slide, Dan. So that is the completed painting as it stands right now. Remember I said I wish I hadn't done that horizontal coming in from on the lower right. I still wish I hadn't done it, but since it's there, I didn't want to paint it out because I liked how the far background was looking with just that one set of very transparent passes. I didn't want to go in with opaque paint and paint out what I already had in there and kind of change the texture of the fabric of the substrate by putting so much paint on and then trying to match the color to the far background. I just decided I would deal with it. And I basically dealt with it by putting these glazes going forward from that horizontal all the way to the front of the painting, to the bottom of the painting on the right, that I just kind of hope draw attention away from that horizontal. Plus, I also just put a lot of undergrowth over the horizontal, so that it is less pronounced. You'll also note I've put in a whole lot of brushes, a whole lot of brush, undergrowth, trees, because I want to keep that sense of the wildering of this man-made endeavor. I want to keep that very, very strong in these paintings. So this painting, as opposed to the first painting, go back to that first painting, Dan. That one. Very different treatments using the same armature. You see that, ladies and gentlemen? So I really encourage you. Now go back all the way to the last painting, Dan. I just encourage you. So I didn't have to come up with the concept of the composition twice. It's the same composition. It just has different emphasis, a different, in this one, the lighting is different, the feel is different, the color choices are different. The armature is the same. So I'd like to see that in your work. I'd like to see people experiment with this. You don't have to build an entirely new automobile every year. During the heyday of Detroit, the 1954 Chevrolet looked a lot like the 1955 Chevrolet, looked a lot like the 1956 Chevrolet. 57 Chevrolet, slightly different story, and then 59 Chevrolet, woo! Anyway, but think about doing variants on the same basic armature of a painting. So that's all I have to say today, ladies and gentlemen. Do a rather short one today. It's all back to me. Now, next week, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a very, very special Reasonably Fine Art Talk, because our guest, ladies and gentlemen, our guest next week for the Reasonably Fine Art Talk is none other than Charlie Hunter. Yep, Charlie Hunter, the jazz guitar player. He is joining us from North Carolina, where he is holed up at home. He and I have kind of casually known each other for about 25 years, and we've always said we should collaborate on something, and he was agreeable to doing that. So next week at 1:45 p.m. Eastern Time, next Tuesday, you'll want to be right here for a nice conversation between Charlie Hunter and Charlie Hunter. And with that, we're going to just promote this Charlie Hunter for a little bit more by running the promo for my new video, which all of you folks should definitely buy, because the cats need the good food. Thank you all. Take good care and look after one another. Bye-bye.
In this video, we're going to discuss principles of design and composition and how those principles can help make stronger paintings. Composition is extraordinarily important in a painting. We're trying to convey a lot of information in what has to be a limited amount of time. It requires real concentration on the big shapes, what to emphasize, where to put the lights and darks, how does the viewer move through the painting. If I can help you sharpen your storytelling skills, I feel like I would have done a great job.
Thanks, Dan.